everyone, welcome to this lesson. This is how to begin doing your UX research and how to begin working with your client to get more data on your project so that you can actually make some prototypes. UX research is user experience research, so it's a user-centric approach to gathering data and using that to inform your design decisions. This lesson will cover setting up a project design document. So basically a document that will cover all the stuff about your projects. You can use it to work with your team. You can put your goals and even meeting minutes on there. We're going through the phases of a project, how to gather information from the client, how to even conduct an interview, and stuff like burn down charts, project management techniques, and what you can do with that information to create your prototype. So first, we have Mimi. Again, she is an engineer navigating her first internship, and she's beginning to now talk to her client and gather some data, similar to your projects. In this lesson, she's going to learn about how to engage with the client, how to gather information about the needs, and how to begin testing with a user-centric mindset. So first, she sets up a project design document. It is like a Google Doc or some kind of template where it's a living document. You can edit the scope, the timeline, milestone dates. I provided a template here on Google Docs, and you can choose how you want to edit this, but it has a project title, team name, when this project will be due. So this is a midterm project. It'll be due October 21st. And I have key dates in here. So September 16, you should be having some data back from your client by next week. You should be using that to make your project prototype by the week after. October 7th is when you test out your prototype with the client again and get some revision. Then October 14th is when you present it to the client for final feedback, and maybe it gets pushed back a bit because that is a week before the presentation. This timeline could be varying a little bit, where maybe you're working a little bit closer up until the final presentation day to get the feedback or to present it to the client. But either way, the client should have seen it before your final presentation day, October 21st. This is when you present it to the class. So on the document, there's things like team roles, which you did previously on another document. It was the team charter document that explains your expectations of what each team member should be doing. There's a project charter and scope. It's similar to before, but now you're explicitly stating what are your project goals. It's kind of like the how might we statement. Describe the specific problem you're solving, the users. Success metrics are metrics that say when your project is completed. So these are ways that you can measure if your project is done, so you don't end up doing scope creep, which is when the scope keeps changing and you never know when the project finishes. So a success metric, for example, you can say that you provide a survey to the client, and the client gives a scale out of 5 about how satisfied they are with the project. If they're saying a 3 or higher out of 5, then they are satisfied or they are happy with the quality. That could be a success metric that you can check off. So 3 out of 5 or higher with the client as a success rating or a satisfaction rating. That could be a metric. Project constraints include the budget, time. Technical would be what kind of things are you needing technical-wise to complete the project. So I have Arduinos, 3D printed components, like things that you technically need. And then the resources are stuff that are adjacent to that, such as lab time or lab space. Next is mood board. So you can create a mood board that is inspiration for your project. There's aesthetic goals, and there's even references to existing projects as kind of like a competitor or market analysis, showing what other things are made already that's similar to your project. Further down, there's user experience research and user insights. So the user interview plan is your template for making an interview with your user. This includes questions that you would ask them. So you can list out 5 or so questions, and if you have multiple users, you can interview each one. For example, if you're doing a bike lane project and you want to get some data from students about who would use a bike lane, you can have different interviewees. So this is interview 1, interview 2. You can summarize their needs and the pain points and opportunities here. And then the next page shows prototype development and testing. You can start describing your ideation. So on this document, you can start typing or draw diagrams of your designs. Prototype notes is explaining what progress you've made each week. Maybe you can look back in time to see how much progress you made, or you look forward to see what components you'll need. It kind of goes into the burn down chart about what you need. Usability testing is once you create the prototype, you test it out with the client. So we'll go through how that would work. But it's getting data and their feelings and the quantitative and qualitative data of a prototype and using that to adjust how your prototype will be. So it's a multiple iteration thing. This part is technical documentation. You can use this to just document technical things or provide links. So there are some things, some people would have coding projects, mechanical design. And then lastly, I have a project milestone summary of the dates going into the project. These are milestones where we'll go through them. Even the design review in class will go through your project. And then the burn down chart, this explains the task that you have to do to complete the project and how many hours are needed to complete it, and basically if the task was completed or not based on the number of hours spent. So this could also be hours completed this week, and then tasks. I would say this is the task that you need, and then hours to complete task. So let's say the task is to design a 3D printed part for the art stand. You can make that as a task to 3D print the part. It will take 4 hours to 3D print the part, for example, and then you can say if you did any hours this week or not. You can also put links to the Jira. If you make a GitHub, you can put it here. And risk management is just if you have risks, kind of like a SWOT analysis, so strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. You can put risks to this project, and that could also be a topic of discussion if you need to bring that up with me. Contingency plans is what happens, how do you mitigate those risks? And these are just templates for team meetings, which you can or cannot use. It's up to you. I put optional, use if you like. Going back to the lesson, there are the multiple phases of a project. There's ideation, pre-production, production, and post-production. This is a template used for game design and just a general design process where you start off by making the ideas. So in that project design document, you can make ideas and put it there. Also state your goals. Then you start prototyping. You literally create a complete working product of like the for the client. The working product doesn't have to have all of the features, but it should just be something that the client can visualize or even test out, hence usability test. So it should be usable to an extent. And it's not a complete product because you're still iterating through and you're not making a product that is perfect. So vertical slice would mean if you slice a cake vertically, it shows all the layers of the cake. Even though you don't have the complete cake, you have the idea of what the whole cake would be. The next part is production. So there's the alpha and beta parts of a production. So there are different phases of creating the game or your product, meaning maybe not all the features are there, but the idea is that you try to do production as quickly as possible and do multiple rounds of usability testing so that you know if the production is on the right track. It's never a linear process where you have one product and you make no changes to it. You always gather feedback and make changes. Post-production is closer to the actual release and making a scalable final product, meaning that product may be released or sold, marketed, and that product is more or less not changing at that point. So Mimi begins with the ideation phase, and then she moves on. So at this point of your project, it would be setting up like what thing you'd want to build. To gather information from the client, you can use these user experience research methods. They're from Nielsen Norman Group. This is a famous group for design. And these user experience research methods, there's about 20 of them in here. One of them includes user interviews and the techniques for that. So Mimi starts by talking to her client and not just talking, but getting a sense of what the vision is so that any product she designs is in line with that vision. So the interview would have a purpose to generate new knowledge, to understand the pain points. For the type of data gathering, it is more about knowing what the current patterns are. So that is attitudinal, or understanding the client's attitude. So it's their behaviors, thoughts, feelings. So these are more about qualitative data points, like understanding where they're coming from. You can also get quantitative data points, which is more about numbers. So maybe they would give you ratings about how they feel about current products on a scale of 0 to 5, where 0 is very unsatisfied, 5 is very satisfied. So there's different types of research and data you can get. When is it used? It's used in the empathize stage. So it's the very beginning where you discover and ideate. The design, there is no design for the client to try. This is more about gathering information. And you can do this through Zoom or phone call or even asynchronously, like without having to talk to the client. You can just provide a questionnaire or a Google form or even answering questions by email. They'll provide this information. This says facilitator participant interaction. You can practice soft skills with talking to them and building rapport as well, which is part of the process because you don't know the client personally, or maybe you do. You get to know what they need, and they're pretty receptive about what they're like, sharing their needs. Creating a burn down chart. This was mentioned earlier. To do that, you put a list of tasks and say the hours needed to complete the task, who is assigned to it, and even the priority of the task. So you can use this example burn down chart or the one in the project design document. It is helpful because you can use this to list out all the things you need to do with your team. It shows who's responsible for what item. It doesn't put undue pressure on how many hours someone is spending on a project, but rather it looks at how much is left to do to complete a project, and you work together and you trust each other that they will tackle the hours needed, or kind of accomplish the task, because you pretty much need the task to be done. So it focuses on what is left to do. This next part is concept testing. Maybe you don't have a complete vertical slice of your project, but you do want to get an idea if the project is on the right track. So for example, Mimi has a few ideas on how she could design her project. She wants to know if the client likes them or not. She can do concept testing. Concept testing is where you can present kind of like a quick prototype to determine if it meets the needs of the target audience. You can do things like a paper prototype where you just draw out the design and explain it verbally to them, or maybe show the features on pieces of paper or on a post-it note, and they'll get a sense of what you're proposing to them. Next is a usability test. So once it's actually completed, you can present the prototype to the client. It's similar to the interview part, except you're now gathering a different type of information to revise your prototype. So the purpose of the usability test is to assess a design that you've already made based on the knowledge that you've gathered. The research type is behavioral. So instead of how they feel in general about the situation, you get their behavior about how the user interacts with your design. So you can gather data about how long does it take for them to interact with your design to a specified goal, things like that. When is it used? You're in the testing phase of the design model. So you'll be in the production where you're creating it and getting feedback at the same time. The design, like when do they do it? They have to physically be present. So it says participants interact with the design. Could be virtual too. Like you can deploy a website and just gather data on how they use the website, but you don't have to be there physically. But it means that you have to deliver the product to them, so they are actually trying your design. And then it says more rigid interaction. So in this case, you don't interfere with them in the sense that you're trying to guide them through your design. You want to be very objective and even see if they fail using your design. If you're making an art stand, you'll see if they can actually make it usable or not. Like if they can do the art stand like operation without any interruption from you. So that would show that they understand the product. So future thoughts. Mimi is now set to begin some prototyping and building, and then she recalls the phases of the design process. So to summarize, ideation, pre-production, production, and post-production.